A few weeks ago in my Reliving The War series, I reached the very last match Ken Shamrock had in WWF, meaning, for the second time, I looked at his entire run from start to end. What I learned from watching Shamrock's WWF career for a second time was that the guy was seriously underutilized, and it's a shame too, because Ken Shamrock brought something new to the table, and even when he was forced to remove some of the traits that made him stand out, he still had an in-ring style that made his matches very unique. During Ken's final months in WWF, the main event picture was very busy. You had guys like Steve Austin, Mankind, The Undertaker, Kane and The Rock all trying to make names for themselves or reinvent themselves into big company players. Evidently, the WWF didn't feel like Shamrock was in the same league as these guys, seeing as he didn't get involved in any pay-per-view main events from 1998 onwards. But by highlighting his WWF run in this video and by looking at some of his key moments, you'll maybe come to the same conclusion that I did. That being, the WWF kinda dropped the ball when it comes to Ken Shamrock. When the WWF introduced Ken Shamrock for the first time, they completely ignored his previous work in the world of pro wrestling. This is nothing new, by the way. It's not like the WWF would talk about WCW all that much when signing guys from Atlanta, and it also made sense not to talk about Ken's previous pro wrestling work because he was much better known for his MMA credentials anyway. Shamrock was a UFC pioneer, reaching the semi-finals of the first Ultimate Fighting Championship tournament only to get eliminated by Royce Gracie, and Ken would continue to excite fight fans with his subsequent matches against Gracie, along with later bouts against guys like Dan Severn. Long before this though, Ken had trained to become a pro wrestler under Buzz Sawyer and Gene Anderson, but his pro wrestling career took him to shoot style promotions such as the UWF in Japan and later on the Pancrase promotion. These shoot promotions helped create this hybrid fighter / pro wrestler that was known as Ken Shamrock. And this rough, hard-hitting path that Shamrock took would help create a very unique performer who had way more legitimacy than your standard pro wrestler. There's no denying either that Ken absolutely loves real one-on-one combat, and later on in life this would be to his own detriment. Many within the MMA world stated that Ken Shamrock stayed in the fight game way too long, and Dana White once famously said that he'd rather pay Shamrock to stay at home instead of paying him to fight. Shamrock announced his retirement from MMA at the age of 55, so you can tell it's something he wanted to do for as long as possible. Still, I'd like to think die-hard MMA fans respect Ken for being a pioneer of early UFC, much like us old-school wrestling fans who respect wrestlers who paved the way for the superstars we see on TV today. ABC News called Shamrock the world's most dangerous man, and this is a moniker the WWF would use for Ken during his entire run within the company. He first appeared on the February 24th, 1997 episode of Monday Night Raw, and it was soon announced that Ken would officiate a match at WrestleMania 13, a little match you may have heard of, Bret Hart vs Stone Cold Steve Austin. Both Bret Hart and Steve Austin warned Ken to stay out of their business, though Shamrock did have to use force when Bret wouldn't stop attacking Stone Cold after the bell at WrestleMania. The crowd popped when Shamrock threw Bret to the mat, and the fact that Bret didn't retaliate not only solidified the Hitman's new position as a bad guy, but it also made Shamrock look like a badass. If Bret Hart was thinking twice about going after this guy, then he must be legit. From here, Shamrock beat the hell out of Vernon White on an episode of Raw. This was a special no-holds-barred exhibition match. Vernon was a Lions Den student who did the honours for the Superior in spectacular fashion, and this kind of beatdown was something WWF had never presented before. It was pretty interesting to watch, and again, it made Ken Shamrock look legit. This guy was really dangerous. Shamrock would then begin a feud with Big Van Vader. You need to remember that at one point in time, Vader was the baddest man in pro wrestling. This is a guy who absolutely brutalized his opponents during his time in Japan and even in WCW. However, Vader wasn't prepared for the backstage politics that ran rampant in WWF, and this once fierce and violent character became a shell of his former self by the time he faced Ken at In Your House, A Cold Day in Hell. Still, the match was noteworthy for being so stiff, and at times it looked like Vader was incredibly unsure about what to do next. Like he didn't know if he should start fighting for real or if he should give Ken a break, seeing as he was new to the more timid style of WWF wrestling, in comparison to Pancrase anyway. Vader told Shamrock to calm down a few times during the bout. Ken didn't even realize Vader tried to stiff him back, seeing as Ken was so used to guys hitting him anyway. Shamrock also thought the match went over really badly, but he was surprised to find out that everyone backstage absolutely loved it. Bret Hart had become good friends with Ken, and these two became close during their time in WWF, and it was Bret who told Shamrock that he needs to go a little easier inside a WWF ring. It was one thing to work stiff against guys like Vader, but if Ken wanted to work with everyone, including the likes of Bret, Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, then he had to back it up a little and just ease up on the strong style work. For the record, Ken said the only person who ever told him to ease up in a backstage informal manner like this was Bret Hart. No one complained or ran to the office when Shamrock worked stiff, but it was good advice right here from the hitman. If Ken got in the ring against a guy like Shawn Michaels and HBK got knocked out, Shamrock would be gone from WWF in no time at all. Shamrock got to work against Bret in the Whole Heart Foundation, leading to his first pay-per-view main event at In Your House Canadian Stampede. Granted, Shamrock was teaming up with some big WWF superstars in this 10-man tag main event that pitted America's best against the hometown heroes, but Shamrock did stand out amongst his peers as one of the more unpredictable superstars involved in the match. By now, Ken had indeed eased up a little, and you'd think you were watching a different performer in comparison to the guy who showed up for the Vader match. But it's not like Ken completely dismissed his offensive moveset to become another cookie-cutter WWF superstar. No, Ken's offense still remained very submission and takedown based, but he worked on timing other big moves during certain points of his matches for maximum effect and impact. He would use a Frankensteiner quite frequently as one of his trademark moves. He incorporated a jumping leg lariat that he could pull off better than anyone in the company during that time period. He also used a belly-to-belly suplex as both a finisher and setup for his ankle lock finisher, and he substituted a lot of his strike and power moves in favour of speed and agility. Rather than stalk his opponents around the ring looking for openings and opportunities to kick and punch, Shamrock would begin using the whole ring to create opportunities. He would run the ropes at high speed, meaning his rebound and running attacks became much more prevalent. In the space of around 4 months, Shamrock was a completely different wrestler thanks to the advice he received backstage, and really, it's up to you to decide if these changes were for the better. Yes, it's a whole lot of fun watching a stiff match with a legitimate fighter inside the ring, but Bret was right. It was only going to get Ken so far before guys refused to work with him. Still, even with this new focus on being more of a WWF wrestler rather than a legitimate fighter, Shamrock still had a mean streak. He would famously snap during or after his matches, which would lead to Ken losing control and going into a blind fit of rage. He would refuse to let go of submission holds, he would attack his opponents with weapons, he would even go after officials and referees who just wanted to help him out. So the WWF made sure to keep this unpredictable side of Shamrock a key part of his wrestling character. Survivor Series 97 nowadays is remembered as a one-match pay-per-view, and that's because of what happened during the show's main event. I too was completely guilty of dismissing everything that happened at this card, but when watching it again for Reliving the War, I was completely blown away by the work Ken Shamrock and The Rock put in during their traditional Survivor Series match that took place in the middle of the card. Shamrock teamed up with Ahmed Johnson and the Legion of Doom to take on the Nation of Domination, and I implore you to go back and watch the final 5 minutes of that match. To me, this is the match that made WWF pay attention to both Shamrock and The Rock, and I don't think that's a stretch either, seeing as Rock was given the IC Championship soon afterwards and Ken would main event the next WWF pay-per-view in December. These two had the crowd in the palm of their hands, and the timing of each and every move brought the audience closer and closer to the edge of their seats. You don't know what's going to happen, and every single thing both men do during those final moments means something. No wasted movement, no time wasting. It's crazy that more people don't talk about these two squaring off as the final two men in this Survivor Series match, but again, it is Survivor Series 97, and the world got so wrapped up in the controversial main event that practically everything else at this show got dismissed. Shamrock got the win for his team. I remember being very excited to see more of Ken in Reliving the War after the performance he put in here along with his partner, but Shamrock wasn't in a celebratory mood when the show came to an end. As mentioned earlier, Ken was close to Bret Hart, and when Bret got screwed over, Shamrock kinda clocked out of WWF even though he still had nearly 2 years before his run came to an end.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a lot, but I think what started it was the screw job with Bret Hart. I think that, you know, for me, wrestling was about trust. And I bought into that. That's what I bought into. Like, I trusted that. And then when that screw job happened with Bret, it was like everything that I was preached to, that I was supposed to honor and trust, was gone, because it came from the top. It came from the top that this is how they were going to take the strap off of Bret, because Bret didn't want to give it up. And it just didn't make sense to me. Like, so when someone disagrees, you're going to go in and you're going to possibly put him in a position to get hurt. What about me? Like, I'm a part of Bret's crew. Like, where do I fit in now? Like, what's going to happen here? Is there distrust with me because I'm a part of that crew? And so that's where things got shifty for me. And I don't know if I necessarily lost heart, but it was almost like I felt like it was time for me to go. Like, maybe I need to go back to what I was doing in MMA and go back there, because it felt like I lost my support.
So Ken went to In Your House D-Generation X, where he didn't win the WWF Championship in his match against Shawn Michaels. In the same WSI interview you just saw a clip of, Ken hints that this was political and a way for HBK and the WWF to kind of put Shamrock in his place. This right here is the first big mistake the WWF made when it came to Ken Shamrock, because really, if that was their intentions, then Ken shouldn't have been booked in the championship match to begin with. Ken would then move right back into a feud with IC champion The Rock, and the rivalry was great. At this point in time, I'd actually call it very underrated, seeing as most people think of Steve Austin and Triple H when they think of Rocky's big Attitude Era opponents. Shamrock and Rock had incredible chemistry, and I think this comes down to both men having trust in each other, something Shamrock seemed very big on during his time in WWF. Rock was also one of Bret Hart's boys, and another guy who Shawn Michaels tried to keep down during the early days of his career. So I do think the Rock and Shamrock's matches were good, because they both had a terrible lot in common regarding the backstage bullshit that used to go on in the WWF. They had a great match at the 1998 Royal Rumble that Rock won due to cheating. Ken did get the 1-2-3, but Rock also planted a pair of brass knucks in Shamrock's trunks. Rock told the referee that Ken used the illegal weapon, and the decision got reversed. This was a good finish. Fans knew Shamrock could beat Rocky, but maybe Shamrock wasn't as smart as Rocky. The following month, the WWF tried to give us a repeat of Survivor Series when Shamrock got featured in the War of Attrition 10-man tag team match at No Way Out. A match that once again came down to Rock and Shamrock. The Rock tapped out again to the ankle lock, fans went crazy. But around this time, Rock was having some serious problems within the nation, and he planned to overthrow Leader Farouk as the faction leader. Rock vs Shamrock one-on-one at WrestleMania 14 was a no-brainer then. The IC title would be up for grabs, and the WWF went to the well one too many times here, with a finish very similar to the 1998 Royal Rumble. Rock topped out and Ken was awarded the IC Championship. After all this time, Ken had finally won the belt he'd been chasing since January that year, but he also refused to let go of the ankle lock after the bell, and again the decision was reversed and Rock was handed the IC title back. Now, this is a fumble in my opinion in regards to the overall character of Ken Shamrock, but you gotta keep in mind too that someone else was benefiting from all this, and that person was The Rock. Rock would go on to become one of the Attitude Era's top headline attractions. He would go on to become one of the biggest superstars in pro wrestling history. So while it's easy to say WWF messed up booking Shamrock's finishes in this manner, you gotta look at the flip side too, and you gotta look at the whole picture. Anyway, all hope wasn't lost yet. Ken beat The Rock again to win the 1998 King of the Ring, and this gave fans immediate hope that Ken's career was going to get pushed to the next level. Previous tournament winners Steve Austin and Triple H were seriously elevated thanks to their King of the Ring victories, but alas, Ken Shamrock stayed put and his tournament win meant nothing. The next year's winner, Billy Gunn, at least got a few main event opportunities, even if he didn't make the most of them. Shamrock's position didn't change at all. The WWF also brought in Shamrock's old UFC rival Dan Severn, and the idea of a Shamrock vs Severn wrestling match was one filled with curiosity. It might have been bad, it might have been a blemish on their previous real fights inside the octagon, but it was still something fans wanted to see, and it was something WWF teased during their television shows. In the end, Ken and Dan had a weak 2.5 minute match on Raw that ended in DQ, and that was it. The company seemingly had no idea what they had, and they preferred to showcase Severn and Shamrock in a more typical WWF manner. To their credit, the WWF booked Ken in some pretty unique matches when he began his rivalry with Owen Hart. Shamrock was also very friendly with Owen, and it looked like these two had a lot of fun competing in the special dungeon match at Fully Loaded 98 and inside the Lion's Den at SummerSlam 98. Shamrock and Owen had a ton of house show matches during the summer, and Ken said Owen was just like Bret in regards to being able to confide in him and being able to seek advice while navigating the murky waters of the WWF locker room. When Owen died, Ken said he didn't have anyone to talk to anymore. He didn't have anyone to keep him right when certain angles were brought up, and basically he felt like he was on his own in the WWF without the King of Hearts. Before Owen passed away though, Shamrock turned heel and he finally won the IC Championship after the belt was vacated. He won a tournament on the 12th of October 98 episode of Raw, and he then competed in another tournament for the WWF Championship at Survivor Series 98. Ken was defeated by The Rock in the quarterfinals, but the following night on Raw, he joined Vince McMahon's corporation alongside The Rock. Rocky was now WWF champion, by the way. The reason why Ken joined the group? Family. Vince McMahon promised Ken the family he never had growing up, and this was enough to make Shamrock join McMahon's evil faction. As part of the corporation, Ken also won the Tag Team Championships. He and the Boss Man defeated the New Age Outlaws on the December 14th episode of Raw, and that meant both Ken and Boss Man were dual champions. You'd again think that things were looking up for Shamrock, and you'd again think his fortunes had finally turned. But then Ken's kayfabe sister Ryan was about to get introduced to WWF audiences, and the creative geniuses within the company wanted Ken to get involved in an incest angle. This isn't a rumour, this actually happened, and Ken rightfully said there was no way he'd participate in such a storyline. It's crazy when you think about it. You've got the world's most dangerous man, one of the few legit badasses the company had on their roster, and they wanted him to get involved in a bullshit Jerry Springer storyline because that's what was getting people's attention. I get it too, everyone has to play their part. Vince Russo and the WWF wanted everyone to have a storyline, but Ken Shamrock is not a man who needs a storyline. People aren't paying to see Ken's escapades outside the ring or Ken's rather disgusting personal life. They want to see this guy hand out suplexes and make people tap out while screaming at the top of his lungs. Dan Severn wasn't safe from this kind of stuff either. The WWF wanted Dan to join the Ministry of Darkness while painting 666 on his forehead, and Dan told the WWF it wasn't going to happen. Granted, what the company wanted Dan to do maybe wasn't as grim as Ken Shamrock's storyline pitch, but still, it shows us that the WWF did not care where these guys came from or what their backgrounds were. Severn decided to leave the company after this pitch was made while Ken stuck around, albeit he was now more or less completely fed up with the company and he was already thinking of returning to MMA. Ryan Shamrock still showed up and Ken became an overprotective big brother. Again, it didn't really suit Ken in my opinion, and the storyline he had going on with Ryan, Val Venus, Billy Gunn, and later on Goldust pretty much led to nothing. Vince McMahon entrusted Ken to find his daughter Stephanie when the corporation began a rivalry with the Ministry of Darkness. Ken turned out to be a great soldier for McMahon when he retrieved Steph, and Vince McMahon said he'd forever be in Shamrock's debt. But in the end, the Ministry of Darkness and the corporation would merge together and Ken would leave the group. He became part of the Union stable, which was very short-lived, and by now you could actually see how much Ken wasn't enjoying his time in WWF. He still performed well, he still had decent matches, but there's a night and day difference when you compare 1997 and 1998 Shamrock to 1999 Shamrock. Owen Hart then passed away, Ken thought he had no one he could talk to backstage, and Ken's final decent rivalry happened against Steve Blackman, with these two having some pretty unique matches. They competed in an Iron Circle match where the competitors were surrounded by cars, and they also competed in a Lion's Den match where the perimeter of the Lion's Den was filled with weapons. Ken was then getting ready to feud with WWF newcomer Chris Jericho along with Chris's henchman Curtis Hughes. Ken was scheduled to face Chris at WWF Unforgiven 99, but Shamrock told the WWF he wanted time off, and the match instead happened on the 21st of September 99 edition of Smackdown. Chris would win this first blood match when Ken started coughing up blood. A match that happened a week prior has also been brought up as a reason for Ken taking time off. He wrestled Curtis Hughes and apparently a neck injury got re-aggravated during this showdown. But Ken never did return to WWF following these Smackdown matches, and the next time pro wrestling fans would see him again was in Japan. A few years later, in 2002, Shamrock would win the NWA Heavyweight Championship at the first ever TNA weekly pay-per-view. In that same year, Ken also made his return to the Octagon. Shamrock faced Tito Ortiz, and Ken's corner had no choice but to throw in the towel. It was said that Ken had trouble cutting weight, which resulted in him cutting too much weight, and Shamrock also said he fought Tito with a torn ACL. So hopefully you can see all the reasons why WWF dropped the ball when it came to Ken Shamrock. His first matches in the company were excellent. He revamped his ring style to great effect, which resulted in some great matches with The Rock, but the finishes booked for a few of these matches didn't really do Ken any favours. He then won the King of the Ring, yet the company didn't do anything with him. Instead, the company wanted him to have an intimate relationship with his kayfabe sister, and when he refused to do so, he was put in a bog standard WWF storyline that didn't benefit anyone involved. He was also made to look like a fool during the corporate ministry merger, a pawn in Vince McMahon's plans when Stephanie McMahon was kidnapped, and he also pretty much floated around the mid-card during his final months in the company. You can also tell that Bret and Owen Hart were important to him. When Bret got screwed, Ken thought he got caught up in political nonsense when he really should have been excited to get a WWF title shot on pay-per-view. And when Owen passed away, Ken said he lost the only confidant he really had left. Really, Ken Shamrock was maybe a victim of the whole Attitude Era and this desire WWF had to present over-the-top and ridiculous storylines. No one can argue the success of the Attitude Era, by the way, and it did put pro wrestling on the map again, but I do think exceptions should be made for certain unique talents, and Ken Shamrock was very unique. No one was safe from these kinds of storylines though, especially if you weren't at the very top of the card. Not Ken Shamrock, not Dan Severn. Your history was kinda pissed away during this era because all that mattered to Vince and the company was that you're now a WWF superstar, and the WWF were embarking on this new creative direction that forced superstars into some wacky angles. Do I think Ken Shamrock could have been a WWF champion? Absolutely. His in-ring work was better than most, and while his promos weren't up to scratch, he still came across as very real on the microphone. I think WWF should have embraced Shamrock's background a lot more, just like they did when he first began working with the company. But, well, at the end of the day, I guess everyone can't be champion either. If nothing else, he deserves a Hall of Fame induction. He's in the UFC Hall of Fame and the TNA Hall of Fame, so hopefully Triple H considers Ken in the future so we can get out in front of WWE fans one last time. Thanks for watching everyone, I do appreciate it, and please take care.
Bustle like an addict with a semi-automatic, who'da had it and he ready for anybody to buck back. Hold on, catch a vibe, ain't no way in hell we leaving nobody alive. Even suicide, no fuck that. Bobby feeling villainous, he killing us. I'm coming for your man and his lady, and even a baby. I'm feeling like I'm chicken Slim Shady with rabies. I'm foaming at the mouth, ain't nobody taking me out. Every single rapper in the industry, yeah, they know what I'm about, and I dare get to test me, cause not a single one of you motherfuckers impress me. And maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I'm full of innovation, and I'm tired of all of this high school. He's cool, he's not rap shit. Can a single one of you motherfuckers even rap shit? Notice that a diss to the game, it's a gas to the flame. Nowadays everybody saying the same shit's lame. Like I'm on to the flame, I'm a relevant and killing. Are you feeling the system when I'm spilling and I'm feeling myself? Yeah, Bobby Bud, he been feeling himself. Man's better like this, can be good for my health. When I rap like this, do I sound like shit? Well, it don't really matter cause I'm killing this shit. Yeah, I'm killing this shit. Oh yeah, I'm killing this shit. Bobby, how many times you been killing this shit? Find another round, goddamn nigga shit. Fuck rap, bustle like an addict with a semi-automatic, who'da had it and he ready for anybody to buck back. Hold on, catch a vibe, ain't no way in hell we leaving nobody alive. Even suicide, no fuck that. Bobby feeling villainous, he killing us. I'm coming for your man and his lady, and even a baby. I'm feeling like I'm chicken Slim Shady.
Like Jay-Z, jiggers up, you fuckers who didn't write anything. Are getting washed like bathing. Young Hova, I know hitters like Yankees. Gun toters, the pull triggers like crazy. Unloading, leave you shot up in your Rover. Your body goes limping, slumps over like A-Rod in a month low, but he just homered. Beast mode, motherfuckers about to get hit with so many foul lines. You think I'm a free throw, figured it was about time for people to eat crow. You about to get outrhymed, could I be dethroned? I stay on my toes like the repo. A behemoth and cheap clothes from the east coast to the west. I'm the ethos and I'm the GOAT. Who the best? I don't gotta say a fucking thing, no. Some C's know, but you don't wanna hear me spit the facts. Your shit is ass like a tailbone, and you're trapped in your cell phone. I'm a chicken scratch on my cell phone. I don't wanna fucking listen to you spit your rap. Someone else